Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about the New Orleans Saints. We'll talk about the draft. We'll talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. And we got a great guy to break it down for you. Columnist from the New Orleans Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. Our good friend Jeff Duncan joins us tonight. Hey, Jeff, thanks for being with us. Thanks for coming down. Fresh back from Louisville and the Kentucky Derby. We're talking a little bit about the Derby before you came in. And for those that have never been to Louisville, if you can compare and contrast just maybe the track itself as opposed to what we see here in the fairgrounds.
Yeah, I tell you, Eric, we were talking before we went on air, and I really think New Orleanians, if you haven't been, it's a great event to go to. New Orleanians would love the Kentucky Derby, and all the ones that I know that go to it absolutely love it because it's 2 weeks of partying and then a 2-minute sporting event.
Right.
It's really a build-up to a great American tradition. And you don't have to be a horse racing enthusiast to enjoy it. And most of the people that go aren't. It's a huge event. It's much like Jazz Fest. You don't have to be a hardcore music lover to enjoy Jazz Fest. Same thing for the Kentucky Derby. And while this year was a little bit of a wet affair, the weather wasn't cooperating, and the race itself wasn't necessarily that great. It was a slow time, wasn't much drama. It's still always, there are no such thing as bad derbies.
Right. And it's a bigger facility than what we see at the fairgrounds?
Yes, it's a massive complex. Churchill Downs has been added on to it year after year, growing this complex, and it has to be massive to hold 150,000 people. I mean, it's one of the largest attended events of any kind in all of pro sports. There aren't too many events bigger than that. And it's a people-watching mecca. There's every slice of humanity at that one facility on one day. Everybody I know that goes has a great time, and I'd highly encourage people to go.
Is it only horse racing? Is there music? I don't know. Obviously, there's a lot of food and partying that's going on throughout the racetrack. But is it strictly horse people watching the horse races during the day and betting on horses, or is there more entertainment than that?
No, there's music out in the paddock area. There's music out in the infield. It's a celebrity watching place too.
Yes.
They have a red carpet, and
really?
This year. Lots of members of the New England Patriots, the Super Bowl champion there, including Tom Brady and Jimmy Garoppolo and Wes Welker and that whole group. And, of course, a lot of the New Orleans Saints executives were there, including owners Tom and Gail Benson, because they had horses running on the undercard this year at the Derby. And they're going to be regulars now because they're whole hog into this horse racing business.
They bought, Garland Gillen was on our show a couple weeks back, they bought a farm out in Lexington, right? And they have 11 two-year-olds that are going to be competing for next year's Kentucky Derby, is that correct?
Yeah, their target for the Derby would be next year. Of course, the odds are, monumental to even get a horse in the Derby. But they got 2 in last year. That's why it was so remarkable they were able to get 2 in. And they're all in, as Greg Bensel would say, in horse racing. It's another part of their business empire that they're trying to grow.
And what about the city of Louisville? We embrace the Jazz Fest, obviously. Is it the same type of situation with the city of Louisville? Do they embrace this particular event much like we do?
It's their Mardi Gras, their Jazz Fest, their Super Bowl. I mean, for myself, who's a native there, it's where all my college buddies and high school friends who have now gone off to other parts of the country, we all come back for that event. So it's a little mini reunion every year. And just a great, it's just a great event. It's getting bigger and bigger. Churchill Downs is doing more and more to make it more of a crossover attraction. So you see people there that have no idea about how to bet on a 3-year-old horse race.
Sure.
They're there for the pageantry and to dress up. It's the one time a year you can dress kind of crazy and not feel out of whack.
And Churchill Downs, is it the second oldest or the oldest track in America?
Well, that's the oldest race. It's not it's not the oldest track. I don't even know if it's in the top 5, but that race has been the tradition of such a great stakes race goes way back to the 1800s.
Wow. It's amazing, kind of ironic, really. I think, what is the Fairgrounds, the third oldest track in the country? On the day of the Kentucky Derby, we're partying there, doing music and food and culture. And, of course, up in Louisville, you guys have your own version of a Jazz Fest / Mardi Gras.
And every once in a while, the way the calendar falls, you'll get a year where it doesn't overlap. It's very rare because it's always the first Saturday of May, and that happened actually a year ago when the Bensons had their horses in the Derby where it didn't overlap. Then you can get 2 weeks of Jazz Fest and the Derby. That's a lot.
Well, welcome back home.
Thanks.
First of all, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. Big news this week about Max Unger and his injury. Jeff, I guess the debate has been, why wait until May for the surgery? Was this a situation where he re-injured the foot working out? Did doctors advise him to let this thing heal on its own before we move forward with any type of surgery? You would think that, especially for an athlete, when you're in between seasons, that you want to get obviously any type of ailment taken care of quickly so that you're on to rehab and ready to be ready for the regular season. There's been a lot of debate on my radio show. I've talked about it. Why the delay here?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot we don't know, a lot of questions that are unanswered, and I'm sure we're going to get some answers when they have the rookie minicamp this weekend. I'm really hesitant to even speculate on it because I don't know what happened. I don't know if he re-aggravated it. I would assume there was some kind of incident that caused a re-aggravation because you're right. You usually get that taken care of as soon as the season's over with. But it's happened in the past. We've seen some of these things happen before with Saints players, even some Pelicans players that delay operations and then it pushes their timetable into the season. And that is not what any organization wants. So I'm sure there was some kind of incident.
Well, Jeff, and that's why I've been so critical of the medical staff and the training staff with the Pelicans and the Saints, because you look at instances like this where you allow, and look, I know most players don't want to go under the knife. If there's a way for them to heal naturally, they'd like to heal naturally, as anybody would. But when that is your livelihood and you're counted on as one of 15 or one of 53, you got to try to get back on the field and be at your best because look, there's always somebody behind you ready to take your place. And I've been critical of the medical staff, as have players on the way out of both those organizations. And it's kind of mind-boggling that the organization has boasted that, especially on the football side, that they've changed everything pretty much. I mean, they have gone in and replaced scouts, replaced people in the front office, coaching staff, as we've talked about on the show previously. But the medical staff and the training staff stays intact, and that seems to me to be one of the weak links of the team.
Well, it's they're under contract, at least the trainers with Ochsner.
That's a sponsorship,
a contract, a sponsor and a contract. So that takes care of basically the training staff for the most part. Now the individual doctors, to some degree, some of them can be brought on from outside, but that's not uncommon though. It goes on in a lot of other professional sports teams, and I don't know enough about the medical side of things to really comment to say if they're bad or good. I've heard players complain about it, but that's also not uncommon. If you get hurt, you have these issues, you tend to blame some of the medical staff. But it does seem pretty crazy how many injuries they've undergone. And I think in this instance, lots of times, it's valuable to look with perspective and see what's going on around the league. I would love to see a study and compare these organizations within their respective leagues, how many injuries they've had, and how it compares. I don't know if it is any different because there is a lot of injuries. If you look at last year, everybody thought the Saints were banged up because their secondary was so banged up, but they weren't even in the top 10 most injured teams in the league.
Well, you look at, again, from the outside looking in, you look at other medical staffs like in Phoenix, where again, players have throw accolades at that medical staff. In Denver, when it comes to football, the same type of deal when they talk about that medical staff there. We don't hear that here in New Orleans. And look, it's no knock against what they're doing. I just have always said, I would hate to think that the Saints and the Pelicans or the management is selling these teams short simply because they have a sponsorship with a certain hospital or a certain group. Getting these guys healthy on the field with the right diagnosis and the right situation in terms of rehab has to be job one for any organization when you're involved in athletics.
Well, and I think there's two different things we're talking about here, and I think the point you make is very valid in that players that have been injured, getting them rehabbed and back on the field.
Yes.
So a player like Drew Holiday or Quincy Pondexter, who's had all his issues.
Jarvis Bird.
Yeah, players that have not recovered, that's one thing. I think it's kind of unfair to some degree to criticize them for, say, this Max Unger thing that we don't even know.
We don't know, right.
We don't know. P.J. Williams has a concussion. There's nothing they can do.
About that.
So there's a lot of things like that I think, it's very complicated in that regard. But I do think getting them back on the field, that's one of their main jobs. And they haven't done as good a job, I think, as they'd like to. Which
leads me to the draft, because if you look at this draft, one of the criticisms of the draft, at least by me, has been the red flags, the medical red flags, and maybe some of the character red flags that we've seen. And, if you had a reputation of getting guys on the field, rehab quickly, coming back from injuries, I don't think that there'd be much of a pause about, some of the guys that have had injuries in college and not been able to stay on the field at a high level. You're talking about guys that played in the Big Ten, guys that played in the SEC, that played at a high level but weren't able to stay on the field. And of course, these guys are going to be expected to contribute. With that said, what are your thoughts on the draft? What are your thoughts on how the Saints did on the draft? Then we'll get into some individual picks.
Well, I thought obviously Marshawn Lattimore was of too good of a value to pass up there. That's a need position. I don't see how anybody can argue with them taking him at that spot. Now, Sean Payton saying that if they didn't take Lattimore, they were going to take Patrick Mahomes is one of the craziest things I think I've ever heard.
Amen.
Considering the other defensive players that were on the board, Derek Barnett, Jonathan Allen,
right.
You could make a case that any of those guys would have been better than a player that is not even going to contribute to your team this year, especially when they've already come out as an organization and said they traded away their best receiver or one of their best receivers to improve the defense.
Yes.
And then you're going to take a quarterback, a backup quarterback?
That made no sense.
That makes no sense. And that also could be a valid argument about taking Ryan Ramczyk at number 32. If you're going to try to improve the defense, why are you taking a tackle that's probably not going to get on the field for a couple of years? I understand he's a highly graded player, but you're trying to win, you're trying to get better quickly, and everybody knows the defense needs to get better. So those things, after that first pick, there's a lot of question marks I have about what they did. And I agree with you also, Eric, the medical red flags, I guess they're just putting validity and confidence in their medical staff and the evaluations they got. I've read a lot of stuff about these players, and from other teams that also felt good about their medical situation. So it's not just the Saints, but it does make you wonder, and especially I'm sure Saints fans are wondering, oh, here we go again, because they've had so many injuries the last few years.
You think Lattimore steps in day one and is a starter for this team?
Yes. I'll be surprised if he doesn't. I mean, that's a position you can step in and start at right away. He was easily the number one corner. They didn't draft him at 11 to be a backup. I mean, his skill set, they don't have a player of that ability. And I think that's actually a position, now we'll see what happens. They've got so many injured guys coming back. We don't know exactly their status, but I think it's a position now that has a little bit of depth, and they can withstand an injury or two there. And that's a position you need depth at because everybody's playing three wide receivers, especially in the NFC South.
Yes, no doubt. How much does he strengthen that defensive backfield just at the cornerback position in your opinion? Does that move P.J. Williams to the third corner now, if healthy? What happens with Sterling Moore down the line, who played very well for this team in a pinch? Or are they a better secondary just at the cornerback position by adding this guy, in your opinion?
Oh, yes, there's no doubt. They haven't had a player of this caliber in a long time, maybe decades.
Right. You think he's that good?
Yes, there's no question about it. Everybody I've talked to thinks that he's a Pro Bowl caliber corner, and I wrote a column on this a few weeks ago. That's the one position that's haunted this team.
Agreed.
The last Pro Bowl cornerback they had was Eric Allen in the Jim Mora era.
Yeah.
That's going back decades. Even guys like Tracy Porter and Jabari Greer that were solid, they've never made the Pro Bowl, and it's the longest drought in the entire NFL of teams that have not had a Pro Bowl corner. Wow. The only team in the league that's gone that long.
Had not realized that.
Yeah,
really.
So that's a position that, for whatever reason, they have not been able to hit on. It's not for lack of trying. They brought in free agents. They've signed some top. I mean, we all know Alex Molden. I mean, Malcolm Jenkins was a Patrick Robinson.
Yes.
They've tried to hit on that spot. It just hasn't worked out.
You think the Malcolm Butler deal is dead now? There was an article recently, as recent as 2 weeks ago, that said Butler really wanted to come to the Saints. Now, obviously, that contract, $50 million, had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, that's why.
But do you think at this point that the deal is dead? You think it will be revisited down the line? Or do you think the Saints will hold and wait till he becomes an unrestricted free agent next year?
Yeah, I think it's dead. I mean, after taking Lattimore, he pretty much is the Malcolm Butler position. And look, Butler wants to play in New England, but he wants to play in New England and make the money that the Saints are offering.
Right, exactly.
And that's where he wants to be. Of course, he wants to make the certain amount of money. And look, someone made a good point to me the other day that I wasn't thinking about it. But for New England to trade him away, and a lot of people were speculating, we give him next year's draft pick. They're going to get a third-round draft pick if he walks in free agency in compensatory.
That's right.
So they're really going to have to take a lot because you're going to lose a year of production on the field,
right.
And then you're going to take a pick in next year's draft. If you're New England, you want the production on the field this year and that third-round pick. So I can see why they didn't make a deal.
Okay. You mentioned Ryan Ramczyk, #1 tackle on the board according to the Saints. They wanted Reuben Foster. We all know about the scenario of being on the phone with Foster when the Niners jump up. Foster's going to be out now for the entire year, it looks like, because of an injury. I really was worried about him simply because of the fact that he was automatically going to be tested weekly, for substance abuse because he's already in the program now because of the diluted sample. That was one of the red flags for me. You can't you look at him as a football player and you say, look, the guy is a dynamic player. He's going to make a difference. But now he takes a redshirt year with the 49ers. Jeff, I thought that the way the draft went early, the first 10 picks, man, I tell you what, couldn't have went better for the Saints the way it went, the way it dropped. But after that, it seemed like every single pick from 12 to 32, from 12 to 32 were players that the Saints could have utilized in their defense. Even some players on the offensive side of the ball, like a tight end, et cetera, that could have helped them. And again, that second half of the draft just didn't fall their way. I thought they got a little caught at 32, feeling that they were going to get Foster, and all of a sudden they just went to, let me go best player on the board instead of maybe trading back, trying to acquire additional picks. What are your thoughts? Look, there's no doubt the kid looks like on paper he's going to be able to come in and play. Could play for 10 years for this team like a Zach Strief, but he's kind of a tackle in waiting right now. Well,
it's similar to what happened to him in 2015 when they were really eyeing a defensive player.
Yes.
I think they were getting ready to take Danny Shelton.
Right.
And he got taken right ahead of them, and they were stuck taking Andres Pete,
right,
who was the best player on the board, but that's not what they were out to get. It's very similar into this first round. That's why I wrote recently that I think they should have been aggressive and traded up to try and get Takk McKinley. It's exactly what Atlanta did.
Yes.
Their rivals went up and got this guy, and he was very highly thought of as an edge rusher. And they had the luxury to do it. They had enough picks to where they could make that move, and I was surprised that they didn't do that. They have yet not shown that aggressiveness for defensive players.
Right.
The only one they've ever done it for was Cedric Ellis in 2008. But they do it all the time for offensive players. So they have a clear vision of how these offensive players will fit into their system. I'm not sure they feel that way about defense.
Is that because of Peyton, do you think? Because
Sure.
Peyton has a vision for his offense, but maybe, again, his subordinates on the defensive side don't have maybe that strong voice in that draft room of the vision they have for a particular player?
I don't think there's any doubt about it that Peyton has that clear vision for offense. We've seen it, and
Yes.
it works.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it works. I don't know if anybody feels that comfortable doing it. And I think you'd see the same thing in New England with Bill Belichick. He feels that way about defense. That's why this trade between these two teams made a lot of sense, because Bill Belichick feels like he can get by without Malcolm Butler, and Sean Payton clearly feels like he can get by without Brandon Cooks. But I think it's something they need to address at some point, because this is twice now they've been caught with needing a defensive player. and not going to get him.
Second round, they go for Marcus Williams. They're saying he's probably going to be the best ball-hawking safety we've seen here in New Orleans since Darren Sharp. Are you buying into that?
Well, I'll tell you, the more I read about him, the more I call around about him, the more I like it. I really do. I think he, along with Lattimore, and you know, we talked earlier about what he's going to do for the position. He's going to be that third guy also in that third safety look. He also can play in a lot of sub packages. He's got great ball skills, but he's also a leader. Everything you read about him off the field, great student, just, you know, overachiever, but also a tremendous athlete. I think he could end up being one of the steals of this draft. A guy that not a lot of Saints fans, I think, knew about or thought about. Yes. But may end up showing up big once they get on the field.
Jeff, when you look at that defensive backfield now, adding a guy like Williams, what does that mean for the future of Kenny Vaccaro, who honestly has become a leader on this team? His skill set seems to be much better, closer to the line of scrimmage, maybe rushing the passer a bit. Do we really know what they have in Von Bell yet? How are they going to utilize these three safeties, do you think?
Well, first of all, the Kenny Vaccaro situation, I think, is going to play out. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, this gives him insurance in case he does want a huge market deal in free agency. You know, I'll be surprised if they break the bank for Kenny Vaccaro. I just don't. I don't think that he's played well enough. Frankly, he's not a Pro Bowl player. He hasn't really. He's had some ups and downs. He had the suspension last year. He's been injured. He's been a good player. But I think he's far from a great player, and I think if they feel like and Von Bell has a lot of the same skill set as he does.
I agree with that.
So, you know, you've got Von Bell already there waiting in the wings, and now you've got a true free safety in Williams. I think they're just setting the stage maybe for him to move on, and it was a smart move if that's in case what they're doing.
A year ahead.
Yeah, get ahead of it, be proactive, and I will be surprised if he's here in 2 years.
Right. They traded up in the third round to get the 67th pick, gave up their 7th round this year, a 2nd round pick last year for the player, the type of player they've been missing in this offense since Darren Sproles was traded to Philadelphia. What do you like? What do you dislike? Do you like Alvin Kamara? What do you think? I think he's going to be a nice fit for that joker role that they've utilized in the past. They've been missing in this offense for a while.
Yeah, they've been trying to replace him ever since they traded away Darren Sproles, and C.J. Spiller did not work out. Travaris Cadet is really not the answer there. He's a solid player, but he's not a difference maker in any way. If I'm a fantasy football owner, I would draft Alvin Kamara. I think he's going to be a big-time player and very productive in that role. I think he's going to be the guy there. And we've seen what happens when you get a dynamic player in that position. You know, Darren Sproles put up huge numbers. Reggie Bush did as well. And I think it's somebody that Sean Payton felt like they had to have. Because I think the offense is going to be a little different this year. Last year it was built around 3 receivers. I think they're going to be built more around the backs and maybe a little more of a short passing game than they have been in the past.
You mentioned McKinley and the Falcons grabbing a player that maybe the Saints coveted and they weren't willing to go up. The Falcons were willing to go up to grab Duke Riley, another player that supposedly the Saints were poised to take. They don't take him. They take Alex Anzalone, who has been an often injured player at the University of Florida in the SEC. I have, mused that, man, if the guy can't stay healthy on the field in the SEC, what happens when he moves up to the NFL with the type of physical play that they have in the NFL? On paper, he looks like a heck of a player. The times that I saw him when he was on the field with Florida, you could see he's got all the measurables, he's got the speed, but the problem is the guy has not been able to stay healthy.
Right, so you're rolling the dice at that point, and that's what the Saints are not afraid to do. They feel like the upside there was too great. I mean, this is a player that was a big-time recruit out of high school in Pennsylvania. Originally committed to Ohio State and Urban Meyer, and then committed to Notre Dame. Ends up down in Florida where his dad is an alumnus. And he actually beat out Jared Davis as a sophomore for a starting job, and Jared Davis ended up being a first-round draft pick. Right. So this guy's got a lot of talent. You're right. It's a roll of the dice. If he stays healthy, they look like geniuses, and if he doesn't, it's not that high of a pick you feel like you threw away. But I'm with you. That position, it's such a collision position, and he's had these injuries that I don't know how he's going to avoid them.
Yeah, really. I mean, he's not been able to do it in his college career, so how's he going to do it in his pro career? The first defensive end that they were able to get was Trae Henderson out of Florida Atlantic with their 3rd pick in the 3rd round. He seems to have all the measurables. He's got a high motor. He's going to be able to immediately contribute on special teams. Maybe he's that Rob Ninkovich type, that diamond in the rough. I know they're banking on that.
That's a very good, apt comparison, I think. He's not going to overwhelm you with his pure athletic ability off the edge. I mean, he doesn't have elite speed up there, but he's a very good athlete, a very underrated athlete. His combine numbers were terrific. And, you know, look, he played, he was a lacrosse star in high school down in Florida at Apopka High, was a great tight end for 1 year. He's a good all-around athlete that just fell through the cracks, and happens in Louisiana a lot.
Absolutely.
And it happens in Florida. There's so many players down there. And I think the thing I like most about him, also the fact that he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He's been passed over, coming from a small school. So this is a guy that's going to play hard every down. Now, whether he can have the physical ability to, you know, beat these left tackles and right tackles in the NFL, I think remains to be seen. But this is a guy you know what you're getting with him.
Right. They really took a flyer on Al Quindin Muhammad in the 6th round, a guy that probably would have been an undrafted free agent. A lot of people thought had a little problems at Miami off the field, ended up getting kicked off the team when Mark Richt came in and tried to clean house down there. But he seems to have a tremendous amount of talent, but hasn't had a lot of experience on the college level. It'll be interesting to see how he transitions to the NFL and if he can be a designated pass rusher for this team.
Another roll of the dice, Eric. I mean, let's face it. They were just rolling the dice here. The guy's got ability. He was another big-time recruit. Went to Miami, recruited by everybody all over the country from Don Bosco. Actually played at Don Bosco for a while with Jabril Peppers, who you know, was a first-round draft pick by the Browns. But you got to question the guy a little bit. I mean, he got into trouble more than once. And, you know, these guys, you get a second chance and then you still fall off. I question a little bit his judgment. And I think anything they get out of him, if he can keep his nose clean, is you know, just lanyard, because I don't think they're counting on him. So it's a roll of the dice at that stage.
It's hard to know on undrafted free agents. The Saints have always hit gold on undrafted free agents. I think the first guy comes to mind is the guy right up river in Traven Durrell. When you look at the Saints wide receiving core and you look at Durrell before the injury, if he is able to totally heal and get back to who he was, I see him being the 4th receiver on this team. But again, he's got to be able to come back 100% from that injury. I don't think he was 100% last year for the Tigers. What are your thoughts there? And is there any other undrafted free agent that maybe caught your eye that may have a chance to make this club?
Well, look, he's got to get his speed back. He's not running like he was before the injury, and that's what one of his main traits. I mean, he was a great track athlete at Brobridge High School, and he was a guy that reminded me a lot of Trae Henderson, with a lot of similarities. And he just doesn't have the same speed. Now, whether he can get it back or not, I don't know. But I agree with you. If he does come back, he's a guy that I think can make this team. He's got the ability. He's got a great attitude. He was a leader at LSU of that position group. So I think he stands out. And I think Cameron Tom, we know right now. I mean, the center from Southern Miss, he's from Baton Rouge. You know, his dad is a math professor at LSU, a very smart kid. And he's going to have a chance now because of the injury to Max Unger. We don't know how long Unger's going to be out, but here's a guy that's a true center, and we know how the Saints value those guys, those smart kind of team captain types. So, look, there's a reason they brought in all these offensive linemen.
Which I think we didn't know at the beginning. I'm like, when I first saw those offensive linemen coming, I'm like, that's an awful lot of offensive linemen for not a lot of spots that are available.
Right, and you figure if their agents would not send them there unless they were told, hey, they're going to have a chance to make this team. So there's going to be some competition there, but and lots of times those guys are you can find diamonds in the rough, undrafted free agents.
They've done it consistently.
Yeah, and a lot of teams around the league have. So I think that it's a position where there's going to be some depth, but the real concern for me with the Unger injury, if he is forced to miss some time, is not necessarily that Senio Calamete is going to play center, because I think they'll be fine with him. It's the depth after that. They cannot afford very many injuries there. They're really going to guys that have no experience at all in the interior.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and that really kind of leads to, you know, as Jack Allen progressed, you know, ultimately, because Calamete is kind of your utility guy. You know, when there's an injury, you can plug him in, and he's able to play almost any position on that line. You know, where again you go into a situation with hoping that Jack Allen, who had, you know, really had some accolades come out of Michigan State. Maybe the measurables weren't where you wanted them, but again, was he first team All-American coming out?
Yeah, and he's an undersized guy, and I don't know if he's put on any weight in the offseason. That's something he needed to do. I remember watching him last year in the preseason against Houston, just getting manhandled along the interior against some of the backups for Houston. But he's one of those overachiever types, smart guy, and if he can put on the weight and gain some strength, which I'm sure he did in the offseason, he might have a shot because he certainly is a productive player.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night with our live broadcast right here on WLAE-TV at 6 p.m. On Friday nights, you can catch us on Pelican Sports Television at 9 p.m. and back on WLAE at 10 p.m. And if you're a Cox subscriber, you can catch us on Thursday nights at 10 and Saturday mornings at 2 a.m. on Cox 130. Jeff Duncan is our guest tonight from Noel.com and the Times-Picayune. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Quick break. We'll be right back. We'll go to the phone lines with about 15 minutes left in the show for your questions.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Camco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Camco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Camco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Camco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Camco Fence, 504-468-9559 or amcofencecompany.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune is our guest. Jeff, the big question now is, did this draft class, did the free agency, undrafted free agents, is this going to put the Saints in a better position going forward, better record, playoff team now? When you look at the NFC South and you see what the other teams have done in the draft and free agency to make themselves better, has this catapulted the Saints now into a position where they have a chance at the division championship and they'll be a playoff team next year?
Yeah, that's a big leap, I think. Look, I think they have a chance. I think there's a lot of teams in the NFL that have a chance. I think they've got enough talent now, especially the young talent on defense. Mm-hmm. They should improve there. If they can find somebody to rush the passer, I think that's still a huge issue. But if they can, I think they've got a shot because I think offensively they're still going to be productive. And I think they're due a little luck, frankly.
Yeah,
they lost a lot of weird games last year. They were in a lot of close games. Sometimes those things turn around. But I just can't get past that first 4-game stretch of the schedule. Right. I don't know how they do any better than 2-2. If they're any better than 2-2, I think they're going to make the playoffs for sure. But I think the schedule just didn't do him any favors this year.
Especially with Unger's injury now.
Right, and we don't know how injured he's going to be. But without him, that's a good point. So, I think they've got a shot. And I think if they can get through that murderous first 4-game slate and they're 2-2, they've got as good a shot as, say, the Bucks or the Panthers, who I think will come back.
Yes.
But I think they can all say that. I don't think they're by any stretch of imagination where they were in 2009, 2011. When you looked at those teams, and just go back and look at those scores,
right?
They were winning double digits almost every game. They're scrapping out wins now, even when they do win.
Right. You mentioned pass rusher. Did this team not have to feel that they had to reach for a pass rusher because maybe they're feeling a little bit more confidence in an Alex Okafor or maybe a Kakaha coming back, in your opinion? Or was it just a situation they weren't willing to reach and maybe there's still an unknown with those two players going forward? No,
I think they just got caught. I mean, I think they wanted one of those guys to drop. I think they probably have some confidence in those guys, but I think they might have more confidence in the fact that Sheldon Rankins is going to be back full time. They should expect improvement for him. Nick Fairley's re-signed. You hope you get the same guy you had last year, and you can generate more pressure from the inside. It might help the outside guys more.
Yes.
So that, to me, would be more indicative of where they stand. Look, we heard all last year at training camp how Kassim Edebale and Obum Gwacham and all these guys, Davis Toll, and none of them panned out. And Darryl Tapp. I mean, they were just, I think, reaching into a grab bag there, and I think they're still in that similar situation.
Adrian Peterson signs a 2-year, $7 million deal. Could be up to $8.2 million with incentives. There's only about $3.5 million guaranteed, so it was a good deal for the Saints and a good deal for Peterson. What role do you think he takes? There's been a lot of chatter up in Philadelphia this week that Mark Ingram may be on the trading block for Jason Kelce if ultimately Unger can't go for the season. I think that is ridiculous talk. There's no way they're getting rid of Mark Ingram. Right. That would be ridiculous to get rid of a guy based on what Peterson has done over the last couple seasons, to think he's going to be the Adrian Peterson of old. He may be, but right now that's an unknown. Right. What are your thoughts on Peterson? If you would kind of morph into that speculation over the trading of Mark Ingram, who I believe is an asset for this team right now.
Yeah, I don't know where that trade speculation came from. I haven't seen if it's credible or not. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. I think Mark Ingram's the clear lead back here, and I think Adrian Peterson is a better version of Tim Hightower. That's what they're getting. He's going to get about 30% of the carries. I think Ingram's going to get roughly 50% of those carries, maybe a little more. That's the way it's worked out in the past. And I think that's the way it's going to work out again. Now, what Adrian Peterson, the Saints are getting, I don't know. I mean, the last 3 years, you don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
He didn't play at all 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago he leads the league in rushing, and then last year he was a non-factor, averaged 1.9 yards a carry behind a bad line, and was banged up. So I don't know. I still don't quite understand why they went after Adrian Peterson. He doesn't seem to fit what they do. I don't think there was a great need for him. I think you could get a guy that could be just as productive for much cheaper.
Right.
And I
undrafted free agent.
Right. I think they had much greater needs to spend that money on. I understand he's a great talent and was a great talent, but it kind of came out of left field to me, and I think there's a reason that Peterson was on the market and was sending out tapes of him bench pressing and running the ball like he was back in junior and high school, trying to get people to recruit him. That to me was a bad look, and it says a lot about what the rest of the league thought of him.
Right. Boy, they've added a lot of bodies to the linebacker position. Yeah. I mean, when you look at in free agency, they're bringing in the draft, etc. How do you think that shakes out?
I don't know. I don't think there's you can name a starter there. For sure.
Right.
I mean, Donnell Ellerby would probably be the one guy you would say if he's healthy, if he's healthy.
Robinson played really well last year.
But they're all about the same. And I think that's the spirit that they're going to go into training camp with is this is an open competition, and we've got enough guys here. Maybe some of them will pan out, but they've got a lot of veteran players at that position. And it's a position that, again, over the years has been kind of de-emphasized, I think, in the league. You don't see very many of them on the field on third down. Everybody's going to 6 DBs. So they need to get somebody in that position, though, that can be productive for them in third down and in sub-packages as far as covering linebackers and backs. It's been a real weakness.
Let's shift gears to the Pelicans. It's funny that in most NBA cities, as soon as the season is over, they evaluate the coach, they evaluate the general manager, and they quickly make a decision. Here in New Orleans, with, again, the Saints being owned by Tom Benson, now GHB Racing involved in this. I've mused that, in the pecking order, it's Saints, GHB, and Pelicans now. And it looks like the Pelicans have taken a little bit of a back seat here. We're just on the cusp of the draft lottery, which will be next week. Alvin Gentry was in Chicago, and he recently told Adrian Wojciechowski of The Vertical that he was preparing as if he's going to be the head coach going into next season. He feels he's been a little bit snake-bitten here in New Orleans with the injuries, but feels that he's got the ability to be able to coach these guys up and to make this team a winner again. Dell Demps looks like right now that he's going to be the guy going forward if you haven't made a decision yet. Or is that right now where maybe we have to wait until the draft is over, the Kentucky Derby has ended, and now they'll throw their focus on the Pelicans? What is it? These guys are coming back, they get one more year of reprieve, or ultimately this was just a delay because they have two big entities they have to deal with during the time the NBA season is winding down into the playoffs?
I think we just have to operate as if they are definitely coming back. I think they would have made a change if they were going to make a change. It would have happened by now. And I think the organization, knowing how they work, I think they feel like they didn't have to announce anything unless they were making a change. In other words, these two men were under, talking about Gentry and Demps, are under contract through next season. And so there's nothing to announce. There's no news to announce in their mind. And that is definitely how the Saints Pelicans organization operates. They do not respond to public outcry.
Right.
They operate pretty much the way they operated for the last 15 to 20 years with this management group. And I would be surprised if there was a change at all. I wrote after the season was over, if you're expecting a change, you're going to be disappointed, because the feeling inside that building was leaning towards keeping them unless something happened, I think, in the postseason meetings between Demps and Gentry. If there was some kind of we can't work together statement made, I think they were going to stick with the status quo. And I'm not sure that's the right answer. Right. But I think that's what they believe is going to happen.
How do you sell that to the fan base?
I don't think they care about how that fans feel about it. I mean, I think they care ultimately. They buy tickets.
Right.
But I think they feel like this is best for the organization because they don't feel like this group has had a chance to work with Davis and Cousins because of the injuries last year. They're getting another mulligan. We've heard that 2 or 3 years in a row now. I think it's fair to say that Alvin Gentry hasn't really had a chance.
I agree with that.
Because of everything that's happened. But Dell Demps now are 7 years in. And look, he saved his job by making the DeMarcus Cousins trade. I still am not sold on that deal. I'm not sold that that's going to be the answer to their problems. You know, our colleague and friend Fletcher Mackel makes a good point. If the goal is to be the Memphis Grizzlies every year, you have a bad goal. And I think that's kind of what I feel like they would be happy with here in New Orleans. Now, maybe the fans would be that way. It's not a great basketball town, but I think when you've got a talent like Anthony Davis, you can win a title.
Yes, you should be able to.
And you should shoot for a title.
Right.
You shouldn't shoot for being the Grizzlies.
And I agree with both you and Fletcher. And I think that the NBA fans here in the city feel like the third fiddle when it comes to what's going on Airline Drive. And, you know, one of the things that they've talked about, at least it's been floated out there, is the stability aspect, that DeMarcus Cousins has gone through so many general managers, so many coaches in Sacramento, ownership changing, that he needs stability. Well, to me, stability would be if you feel the guy, if ultimately you look at the track record of the individuals that are involved here, and they have not been able to get over the hump simply because you pull a rabbit out of your hat and be able to get a guy that, you know, a lot of teams weren't willing to take a chance on. A lot of teams that were set up, were playoff teams, teams that felt that they had were ready to take the next step. They didn't want to deal with the baggage of DeMarcus Cousins. And ultimately, again, it fell into your lap. That, along with, again, the owner falling in love with the guard.
With Drew Holiday?
No, the first-round draft pick. Just slipped my mind.
Oh gosh, Buddy Hield.
Buddy Hield. That was part of this deal going forward. With that said, to me, you go into this situation, if you're going to make the move, you make it this year, because then you've got some stability in the organization going forward. And ultimately, if you're going to re-sign DeMarcus Cousins, if he's going to re-sign here, he knows there's some stability in this organization. They're not going to jettison a general manager the second year in a row, more than likely. That general manager is going to set the path for the future. And I just don't think that the fan base has a lot of faith that Dell Demps can surround Davis and Cousins with the type of players that can win a championship here in New Orleans. And that's a problem, honestly.
Well, look, I think the fans have every right to be upset and every right to be disillusioned with the direction of the organization. I would say, playing devil's advocate, if I'm the Pelicans, changing out the head coach, or maybe you have a better chance to change out the general manager.
Right.
But then if you change out the general manager, he might want his own coach.
You got to give him the opportunity to have his own coach.
And you'd be changing another coach on DeMarcus Cousins, who went through 6 of them in Sacramento. That might give him pause. Right. First of all, DeMarcus Cousins isn't the most coachable guy in the world. We know he at least respects and gets along with Alvin Gentry. Are you going to bring in another guy? That's just a whole other element of that I don't think they wanted to face with DeMarcus Cousins. And it just shows you how this organization right now is all in on DeMarcus Cousins. Everything is built around making this thing work and being successful. And there's going to be a lot of heads roll if it doesn't work out after this season.
I think he'll resign, personally. I mean, I don't think you walk away from the type of money that he's going to have to walk away from. I think I've gone through it on this show. I've gone through it on the radio show. Lost $30 million when he walked away when Sacramento traded him. He can make up all but $10 million of that if he re-signs with the Pelicans. If he doesn't, he loses an additional $20 million. So, I mean, when you look at that when you throw those kind of dollars away, and the fact that he's from Mobile, he's playing with not a college teammate, but someone from the University of Kentucky. These guys seem to get along pretty well.
I agree.
I think that AD seems to be a stabilizing force for DeMarcus Cousins. There's some respect there.
Definitely.
You know, I think they could play well together going forward. But the question is now, how do you surround these guys with the right pieces to be able to get to the next level? And the first question mark out there is Drew Holiday.
Right. If you bring back Drew Holiday, you have very little cash to sign somebody that can upgrade your wing position. So look, they're hamstrung. There's no question. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't go after Drew Holiday, because it allows them maybe to bring in a top-level wing and maybe a lesser point guard, but they don't really need a ball hog point guard. No. I'm not saying Drew Holiday is.
No, he's not.
But they could use just a setup, the big men point guard, more of a ball distributor at that position. And those aren't going to be nearly as expensive as Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday is going to command a max contract, and there's going to be competition for him.
I agree.
There's going to be a bunch
Especially
of teams
when you look at the guards that are on the market right now.
Right, yeah. He's going to, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does, because I think it's going to be a really true indicator of how people view this organization. I mean, they've done everything they can for Drew Holiday. If he leaves, I think it's a bad sign for the organization, and I think it will be a seed in the back of DeMarcus Cousins' mind of like, hey, what do I want to stay here?
Well, it's also about fit too. I mean, he's not really the fit at the point guard.
Right.
He played pretty well at the off guard. I mean, again, a little bit turnover prone at times. He's the best on-the-ball defender they have on the team. There's no doubt about that. The question to me is going to be fit, and then how much do you put up to be able to hold on to him there? And I think those are the big critical issues going forward. And then I will say this, though, Jeff. With two guys like Cousins and Davis, you should be able to attract veterans to come to this team that want to play with them, as we've seen with other franchises that feel they have a chance to win a championship. It might be a little bit early in year one, the first full year, but eventually these two guys are going to be under contract here for a while. You should be able to get guys that are willing to come in for the league minimum, for the mid-level exception, the biannual exception, that are going to play for a little bit less than maybe they play elsewhere, because they know they got a legitimate shot going forward to win a championship if you surround them with the right guys.
Right. I don't know what the perception is around the league. I think the perception probably of New Orleans has changed because of getting Cousins, but I still think they're up against it. When you look at, say, Minneapolis or Minnesota, Philadelphia with the young talent they have, Utah's an up-and-coming team, Portland even, they're going to have to battle those teams that also have a lot going for them and have been more stable and have been more successful, frankly, than this organization. So for all the things we think of New Orleans and how great a city it is, that doesn't matter to NBA players. They want to win titles. They want to win successfully, be successful. And look, they want money. That's all.
Money's always the bottom line, unless you are guaranteed an opportunity to win a championship. We've seen what's happened in Cleveland. We've seen what's happened in Golden State. You know, a player with just a few years left in their career will jump on with a team thinking, you know what, my skill set's going to work here. I'll take a little less money to be able to get a ring.
Right, but that's not the case here.
No, not even at the long shot.
You make a really good point. But they should be able to attract somebody here, because they're going to be wide open shots on the wing here, and every player wants that situation.
Final question about the Pelicans before we move on to the callers. Do you see a major overhaul on this roster? They've got some dead weight on this roster, some bad moves that have been made in terms of the salary cap. The possibility of maybe packaging some of these players, possibly maybe stretching some of these players going forward. Two players come to mind, Pondexter and Omer Sheik. The possibility of stretching those guys and maybe getting some more money under the salary cap, because they need an influx of cash here to go out and surround Davis and Cousins with the players to make them successful.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think I would be surprised if they do that, just because I think you're just kicking the can down the road to some degree when you do that. You spread some of the money out. I think they're stuck. I think they're stuck because of these bad deals. They had to go above market to get some of the guys that they did last year, but you can question that now, because those players, neither Solo Hill or Etuan Moore are starting caliber players in this league, and they're paying them basically starter money.
Right. And you see, that's my point, Jeff. With two guys like that, I don't think at this point in New Orleans you should have to be able to pay players above market to come to this city when you got two players at the top three at their position. I mean, when you got that type of two players, which is unusual on one team, you shouldn't have to overpay going forward. But now you're going to be paying for the sins of the past, and that's one of the reasons why I feel Dell Demps shouldn't have the opportunity to be able to come back to this job, because he has put them in cap hell, so to speak.
Yeah, there's some unforgivable sins there.
Unforgivable, agreed.
And Omer Ashik is number one. it's one thing to go get him from Houston. It's another thing to re-sign him.
Agreed. And then as John Reed said on my program a while back, to bid against yourself.
Right.
Okay. To bid against, you didn't have to bid against yourself on that.
No, and they're paying the price for it right now. And those are the decisions that you live with for years. It's like hiring a bad employee.
Mm-hmm.
When you do that, you have to live with that decision for a long time.
Let's head to the phone lines. 866. I'll tell you what, let's just go to the phone lines. Deborah is in New Orleans. I got too many phone numbers with the number at the radio station, but let's go to Deborah in New Orleans.
Hi, how you doing?
Hey, Deborah.
I have a question, and it's about Chris Paul because he'll be a free agent. What do y'all think about him coming back to New Orleans as a Pelican?
Thank you, Deborah. And the number is 866-3200. I think that fans would love to have him here, but I don't think he's leaving Los Angeles, and I don't know if the Pelicans can afford him.
Yeah, I agree. Deborah, it's a great idea. Matter of fact, my sports editor at the Times-Picayune's been begging me to write that column for a few months now, and I've been hesitant because I don't think it's feasible. I don't think he's going to come here. I think that ship has sailed. I think he'd be a great fit with these two big guys.
Come on.
Can you imagine? He was the perfect kind of point guard.
Perfect point guard and a field general. He's a guy that could motivate those guys on the court, get them where they need to be.
And command respect.
Exactly, immediately.
Yeah, he's the perfect fit. I just don't think they can afford him unless, obviously, if they let Drew Holiday go. But I don't think the interest level from him at this stage of his career, I think it's a long shot.
If they were a little further along, you might be able to woo him here, but they're not.
They're not.
They still need too many other pieces. It's at least a couple years away, at best.
Yeah, I agree. And I think at this timetable where he's at, he's going to want to go somewhere and win right away. It wouldn't surprise me if he did a Kevin Durant type deal. He's made enough money in his career. His legacy will be preserved by winning a title.
Agreed. I definitely agree with that. Ernie is in Slidell. Ernie, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Ernie. Ernie, you with us?
Here's the questions I got. I follow basketball, okay? And the Pelicans last year, when they were out the playoffs, they had this guy Lance Stevenson in here. And he looked good toward the end of the season. This season starts, and he gets injured, and they cut him. I just recently think he signed with the Indianapolis Pacers. That's one. This guy Omar Sharif that came over with Cousins. He plays one game, he's hurt, he gets cut. He was a shooting forward. And the last one, just for curiosity, Jimmy Ferret, who was with him last year, he was the highest scorer in college, and he's supposed to be tearing up the China League, averaging 45 points a game. I'll listen to your replies.
Caspi and Stevenson were salary cap casualties. They did not hold on to them because they felt that ultimately their injuries would take too long to heal and they needed to get other bodies in here.
Roster spots.
Right, roster spots, okay?
Now, that doesn't answer why they held on to Quincy Pondexter for 2 years.
Right.
In the exact same situation. I have not understood that. And Jimmer Fredette, look, he was here. We saw, I don't think he can play in the NBA.
No. He can tear the Chinese league up, but he's not tearing the NBA.
Right. Jordan Crawford averaged, he scored 72 points in a game in China.
Right.
Any American playing over there, it's not the same caliber competition. And I've talked to Crawford about it. He led the league in scoring, was one of the MVPs of the league. It's not the same competition. There's about 2 or 3 players per team that can play, and everybody else, is not that level. So, but I understand what you're saying, Ernie, in that they made some curious decisions about who they keep and who they don't keep, and I think it's created an instability in the roster. And I think some questions. We heard Eric Gordon say at the All-Star break, there's just a lot of things that happen here that causes players to wonder about the vision and the functionality of this organization.
But doesn't that go back to the guy that's in charge?
Of course.
It goes back to Dell Demps.
Where it falls.
It blows my mind that they have blinders on about this right now. Almost like they feel comfortable. He's my guy. We like him. He's in the organization. He's one of us. Instead of worrying about, what's best for the organization.
Right, but I think this organization is different than a lot of organizations around the league because of the situation with the Bensons owning the football team at the same time. It's just a complicated, unique situation. And I'm not saying it's right, but it's definitely factoring into all these decisions. In some ways, I think you can make the argument that Tom Benson buying the Pelicans was the best thing that ever happened because it kept a local ownership. Right. In some ways, I can think you could argue it's one of the worst things because it's not the top priority for them.
I 100% agree with that. Because on one hand, you feel like it's local ownership. They'll be here forever. But then we don't know, how long Tom Benson will be here, and then what happens after that. And then and even in the short term, as you mentioned, to be third on the pecking order out there, even the players have to wonder at times, what's going on here when we're behind the Saints and the horse racing stables.
Well, and I'll tell you, I've yet to hear that from any of the players, and that's one thing I would say. Now, publicly, no one's ever really come out during their time with the Pelicans. I mean, Anthony Davis has been on board the whole way.
True.
And I think they're very lucky to have a franchise player like him. He's more Tim Duncan than he is Chris Paul.
Agreed.
That he's happy here. I think his personality fits being in a smaller market. And so I think they have a gem there. They've got to make sure that they can keep him, but to do that, you got to start winning at some point.
No, and look, the clock's ticking here.
Right.
No doubt. Bernie is in New Orleans. Bernie, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Bernie.
Hey, guys. Hello, Eric. Hello, Jeff. Great show tonight. First of all, to go back on something you talked about with the personnel moves, or actually the non-moves, the only reason that Bell Demps and Gentry will be back is because of money. The Pelicans don't want to pay them the salary in absentia and then have to pay the replacements to come in and be the GM and be the coach. So that's strictly money. They know that they're both in a lousy job.
Okay, Bernie, I think we got your question. You had a bad connection. They don't want to get rid of them because of their salaries, because of money. You buy that?
Well, I think that it's definitely a factor. I don't think there's any doubt. Now, I think they would definitely get rid of them if they had to. If this thing would have bottomed out this year like it was going, and they wouldn't have made the DeMarcus Cousins trade, they'd have bottomed out. They'd both be gone. There's no question in my mind. So money to a point. But they would have made that trade. I mean, they would have made that change if they wouldn't have bought time with the Cousins trade.
Jeff, when you balance everything, though, when you balance making sure the players, again, Boogie Cousins and Anthony Davis are happy, making sure you can still attract major sponsors to be able to sponsor this team, and then you look at the minuscule amount of money when you compare that to what you would have to have a buyout. I mean, it's mind-boggling to really think that that might even be a concern of that organization right now.
But I can tell you, Eric, the NBA business model is so lucrative right now with that contract from ESPN that they're making money no matter how many people show up at these games. The contract is so lucrative, and the sponsorship dollars they're getting on a global basis, they could probably have an empty arena and still make their bottom line.
Right.
And so that's part of the deal here. I mean, it's not hitting them in the pocket. We all know Tom Benson is a bottom line man, and he wants to fill that place up, trust me, but it's not a huge priority because they know they're still making money.
The Tom Benson 10 years ago probably wouldn't have let this thing linger.
No, I don't think there's any doubt.
He'd have cut bait. DJ is in New Orleans East. DJ, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, DJ.
Hey, Eric, Jeff.
How you doing, DJ? Could you turn DJ up a little bit, guys? Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, we got you. Go ahead,
DJ.
Okay. Yeah, look, I'm thinking, miracle happens here twice, with the Anthony Davis, and then now maybe getting back into the top three. Do you think the priority would be to get a small forward or get one of the point guards that seems to be pretty prevalent in this year's draft? And I'll hang up and listen.
DJ, thanks for the call. You know what I think is going to happen, Jeff? They get one of those top three picks, they're trading it. I don't think Demps is going to bring in one of these young players that they have to groom over time. I think he's going to dangle that pick out there and try to get veterans if he's still here making the call.
Well, I'd be surprised if he did that. But look, stranger things have happened with this organization, but that would be a miracle if they get one of these top three picks.
Agreed.
I mean, the mathematical odds aren't even close to what they were.
It's like literally hitting the Powerball.
Right. It'd be 1 in a million almost. So I wouldn't count on that. I wouldn't hold my breath. But if they did, my priority would be get one of these wing guys that can play and get a playmaker. Yep,
no doubt. Jeff, thanks for being with us.
Sure, man. Thanks for having me.
Jeff Duncan, the New Orleans Times, BigQ, NOLA.com. Great columnist. Got to check out his columns as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLE at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Television. That's 9 p.m. on Fridays. We're on Cox 130 now, so if you came in late, missed us, you can catch us on Cox 130 at 10 o'clock on Thursday nights and 2 a.m. on Saturday mornings. Don't forget to catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO. That's 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. weekdays. The TuneIn Radio app is a great way to take the show with you anywhere. You can always check us out at ericasher.com. You can listen live, download the podcast. Every single episode of Inside New Orleans Sports is also at ericasher.com as well. Thanks to my good friend Jeff Duncan of New Orleans Times-Picayune. Also to our WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juno, Naila Jones, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back here with another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports for you next week. Have a fantastic week.
New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.